go ahead and get started. Good morning. Welcome to the Cass Fraud Seminar. I'm Mark Benton. I'm Executive Vice President of Cass Commercial Bank. And I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker. Our speaker is Marcy Colfrin, and she has a lot of credentials behind her name: AAP, AP, RP, NCP, and she is the Senior Director of On-Demand Services for EPCOR. Marcy has 26 years experience in the financial institution industry, including financial institution operations. Marcy obtained her AAP, which is accredited ACH professional, and NCP, which is National Check Professional accreditations, and APRP, Accredited Payment Risk Professional accreditation. She currently represents EPCOR membership on the Electronic Check Clearinghouse Organization Operations Committee, NCP Editorial Board, and Notch's Payment Innovation Alliance. Marcy is responsible for the National Check Payments Certification Prep Program and on-demand services for EPCOR. EPCOR is a payments association that provides payment expertise through education, advice, and assisting banks in maintaining compliance, reducing risk, and enhancing overall operational efficiency of payment systems. So protecting your business or organization against fraud is more important than ever. Bad actors are using technology, has made fraudulent activity spike to new levels. After Marcy, we're going to have Vanessa McKennis, manager of the Cass Treasury Services, and Cassie Boyer, who's the Cass Treasury Service Sales Specialist. They'll discuss the products that Cass has available to protect against fraud. And they'll be available to answer questions after their short presentation, and you can come up and ask them anything you want. Also, we are going to have Dwight Erberger, our president, come up and say a few words at the end. But we're glad you're here. And at that, I will turn it over to Marcy. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. I am honored to be here talking on behalf of Cass Commercial. And we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite subject, right? Your favorite F word, fraud. That's kind of a joke in the banking world, right? When we go out and train our bankers, we talk about, we know that's your favorite F word, fraud. And that's because it just never stops, right? I mean, you think you've got it curtailed, and then they move on to something else, right? And so you have to be diligent in what you're doing, not only at a financial institution, but at your business, right? To kind of mitigate some of these things from happening. So, as they said, I am the Senior Director of On-Demand Education at EPCOR, and he kind of told you what EPCOR was, right? So we're one of 10 of the payments associations. We started out with like 14 of us, but there's 10 of us throughout the United States that we, actually provide education and support to our financial institutions, and we actually do advocacy for our members as well on Capitol Hill and those types of things to try to get some things changed. So that's kind of what EPCOR does, and Cass Commercial is a member of EPCOR, so that's why I am here today. Here's just our brief disclaimer that says, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to provide any kind of warranties or legal advice to you, and that, we're just giving you this information as educational purposes only. All right, so here's the topics I'm going to cover today, right? We're going to talk about business email compromise first and the various ways that scam comes about. We'll talk about online banking, since a lot of you transact a lot of your business through online banking, right? And we're going to talk about how criminals can get access to those online credentials, and then what kind of fraud they're committing once they have that access to your online credentials. We're also going to talk about one of the oldest forms of payment and how fraud is occurring, and that's check, right? So believe it or not, checks are still around. They've been telling me for at least 10 years or more that they're going away. We're never going to see them again. Hasn't happened just yet. And criminals have found that it's very easy to use checks as a way of committing fraud. Because as we've moved more to a digital society, there's a lot of things on the physical paper checks that, we really just don't look at anymore. And, really we should be still vigilant and looking at those items that we're getting, not only as a financial institution, but businesses that are receiving payments. And then we're going to end the day talking about one of the more newer types of fraud, right? So we've got fraudsters out there that are using artificial intelligence, right? So they're moving up with the times. And we're going to talk about, how they can perform tasks, right, that are normally, done by an individual. So they can mimic an individual, their voice, how they look, those types of things. So again, I'm going to talk about the types of fraud, how to mitigate them, but then, as Mark said, they're going to have some folks come up and kind of tell you what Cass Commercial has, right, as far as their products and services to help you combat some of these issues that we're having. So we're going to start with business email compromise, right? So let's define what it is first, right? It's a type of cybersecurity where the scammer uses email in order to trick someone into sending money, right? Or giving up their confidential information. So really the culprit kind of poses as a trusted person, and then they're either asking you to pay a fake bill or an invoice, or they're asking you for sensitive information like logon information, right? So to kind of put it in perspective, business email compromise has been around for years now, right? And, according to Verizon's 2023 breach investigations report that they put out, business email compromise attacks are now representing 50%, right? More than 50% actually of the social engineering incidents, and the amounts that are being stolen have averaged, that has even went up to about 50,000 per incident, okay? And the FBI actually is attributing $3 billion in the estimated $10.2 billion to these kinds of attacks. So it's been around a while, but as you see, it's not going away. It's getting worse, right? So the number of incidents is going up. The dollars amounts that you are losing is going up. So again, the BEC is a form of social engineering, as it really relies on manipulating humans, right? So the emails often use emotions to trigger them to do something, right? So the emails are using familiarity, right? You feel like it's coming from a trusted resource, right? So they make you feel comfortable. Or there's a sense of urgency, right? You got to get this done. You got to get it done within 30 minutes, right? Or they put fear in you. Get it done within 30 minutes or else, right? It's really going to harm this client, right? Or sometimes they even make you feel like you're being helpful, right? If you get this done, you're really helping this large client of ours. So they have all different kinds of emotions that they can use in these emails. But then we've got phishing and pretexting, right, which are really the main methodologies used in a BEC attack. So phishing usually uses urgency, right, and fear, right? And so they get people to share sensitive or confidential information. So they make you feel like you have to give them the information. Pretexting actually uses familiarity and trust, right? So again, you're getting an email from someone you trust, right? So you're familiar with them, and so you feel comfortable in doing whatever action they're asking, whether it's giving up company information or you're giving up, they're telling you to pay a fake bill that they just made up, right? And then once the scam starts, it actually uses or particularly takes a couple of different paths, right? And so the hacker may request more information than that they'll use in a longer attack. So sometimes they're just wanting information. Not necessarily they're going to steal your money, but later on they're going to kind of use whatever information you gave them in a larger attack, right? That's going to affect more companies or more financial institutions, and the dollar amount will be greater. So in the end, they will use it to not only affect you, but it could affect others downstream. So once they get the login information, right, and they steal those credentials, well, then it's pretty much a no-brainer at that point, right? Once they have your credentials to do anything, whether it's on your system or your banking system, right, they can pretty much do anything with your money, right? And so the BEC-inspired action is really the end goal here, right? So the fake email or invoice from a supplier that provides notice of change, right? So a lot of times they will send you a fake invoice, and someone that is familiar with this company, they might notice that, oh, they want this payment to go somewhere else, maybe to a different account if you're doing ACH, or they're asking you to send a check to a different address, right? Not sure if you have people within your businesses that really look at those kind of things when they're getting an email, right? They're just like, oh, well, yes, I know this company. Yep, we probably owe them this money. And they cut the check and send it off, right? But they really should be looking to see if that's going to an address or an account number that is where you're normally sending those payments to, right? Not just doing what the email says. They also like to target you internally, right? So they like to target your HR or payroll areas, and they like to pretend to be your employee, right? So if you're paying employees, let's say via ACH, they like sending emails saying, well, I need to change my banking information. I switched financial institutions, right? So a lot of times they will target your employees. And so they'll send the request over to HR once they are in your system, right? And they can do that. And HR just thinks, oh, okay, it's coming from Marcy Cawthon. She's saying, she switched banks, so we're going to send her payroll over here. And it doesn't get caught, right, until the employee doesn't get paid and they're wondering where their money went. So it's, kind of both sides of the coin there, right? So, these folks aren't only targeting financial institutions, they do target businesses. So who do the fraudsters really target, right? Well, they're going to target anybody that has access to your accounts, right? Anybody who can has the authority to send money or make changes on an account, right? So those CEOs, CFOs, those people that are able to send those types of requests, that's really who they're looking for. Really, they target HR, payroll in your companies. They like those folks as well. And really any employee within your business that could be an entry point to one of those higher up folks, right? So maybe an executive secretary who, they know that they can kind of put the fear in, you need to get this done because I'm your CEO and I'm telling you, you need to get it done and you need to get it done within this time frame, right? So if they know that those folks also have access to the people that can move the money around, they'll target them as well. And so who do the emails pretend to be? A lot of times for companies, it's suppliers or, your external partners, right? they're sending fake invoices, or they're asking you to update their financial information. All right. So again, anytime you're getting a request to change their financial information, you ought to do some checking up on that email, right? Call your representative from that supplier and say, we got this request in, is that really what you want us to do? Senior management sending emails to maybe a junior employee. So the example I just gave you, where you have maybe an executive secretary that's getting a request from a CEO or a CFO that is saying, we need to wire money to so-and-so, we need to get it done. And usually those have an urgency kind of tone to them, right? They're saying you need to hurry up and get it done. And by the way, I'm not going to be available. Me and the CFO are out of the office, or I'm on vacation, or I'm going to be in meetings all day, right? Usually those are questionable, right? If they're saying there's no way for you to really confirm that I'm saying this, you just need to get it done, right? We've also seen some companies get emails from attorneys, especially if they're going through litigation for anything. And these are, these spoof emails where they're trying to get personal information about your company or confidential information about your company. I will tell you more times than I've seen, an attorney is not going to ask for that kind of information through an unsecure email, right? They're either going to call you on the phone, you're going to be in their office, or they're going to send it through a secured email venue. And then they also like to pretend that they're your employees updating their financial information, right? This business email compromise is kind of a human type of attack. Your employees are really going to be a vital layer, right, of defense against it. Because cybersecurity training for your employees, I think, is really crucial, and it should encompass, phishing attacks and social engineering awareness. And, train them on, the common BEC scams that might relate to them, right? Because a spoofed email that comes to maybe a junior employee is going to look a little different than one they're sending to maybe a CEO or a CFO. So make it, relate to really what their job is within your company. Also, your company should have a BEC incident response policy, right? That all your employees are aware of. They should all know you have one, because they need to know what steps to take if they get an email that looks suspicious or it's concerning to them, right? How many in the room have an incident response for fraud? Have something in place? Okay, so a few hands went up, not very many. You really should have something in place for your employees if you're running a business. And what are some steps that need to be in that policy, right? Well, number one is, if you get a suspicious email, don't engage with it at all. Don't click on any links, don't reply to it, don't do anything with it, right? They probably should contact your IT or your security area immediately, right? Or if they get something that's suspicious and they want to reach out to who sent it to them, again, don't hit the reply button to respond. Don't call the number in the email that they're telling you, call us, if you want to confirm. Call the number you have on record for that supplier or vendor, right? And if you have a direct line, the better. If you have a direct line to someone who is your contact, call the direct line. If you have to call a main line, like an 800 number to get someone, ask for someone that manages the accounts for that company. That's who you want to talk to, okay? Also, you might want to have the person that's in charge of this policy report any incident to the Internet Criminal Complaint Division. That's a division of the FBI. It's called IC3. They encourage you as a business to report these, not just financial institutions, but businesses that feel like they have been, given an email that is part of a scam. They want to know about these types of scans. So, report it. And I've given you the link there of where you can actually register your complaint to them. Also, look at your procedures, right, on managing your invoices and payment requests, or updating financial information, or sharing personal or confidential information, and kind of ask yourself, where can we add some things, some checkpoints or safeguards, right, to our existing workflows to maybe make it less likely to fulfill a fraudulent request, right? So for example, maybe the policy you have for HR, when somebody is sending a request to have their bank account information for payroll changed, you don't have them hit the reply button to that employee saying, hey, I just want to make sure this is legit before I make this change in our payroll system, but actually initiate a brand new email to that person, right? They're going to be in your address book. They're an employee. So you just initiate a new email and say, hey, I just got a request from you. I just want to make sure that, you want this information changed for payroll, and we'll get it done for you. As far as technology mitigation, right, what can we do to kind of mitigate this type of fraud? Well, strengthening your access controls, right, to your network. Is also a great cybersecurity defense practice, right? So using some type of multi-factor authentication, or, if you've got users that are no longer with you, disable those user IDs, right? Don't leave them out there. A lot of times if you have people or a large turnover in your business, you kind of forget to turn off those things when they're not there anymore. So if you have unused accounts, just make sure that they're disabled. Review permission levels, right? Don't give all of your users access to everything, right? You don't want them to have access to everything. You just want them to have access to what they need to get their job done, right? Segment your network. So if a hacker does maybe get into your employees' credentials, then they're not really able to do much, right? They can't do something across the company, right? Keep all operating systems and your software up to date. So make sure if you've got patches that need to be installed. I know at EPCOR, I get messages all the time from our IT that, hey, we have updates on the cell phones that they give us. They just said that a new software came out. You need to make get this downloaded. It's got some patches on it, or same with our internal laptops and things like that, right? So just make sure that you're keeping up to date on those. And you might also want to end some type of endpoint security or anti-phishing or email filtering, right? Software to help reduce those attacks as well. So let me ask this before we go to online banking. Has anyone in the room received some kind of bogus email? Whoa, look at that. Almost every hand went up. Okay, let me ask this. How many of you have acted on that email and it's caused a loss for your business? Okay. Okay, or somebody in your company, right? Not necessarily you, but maybe your company took a loss because somebody did click on it. Okay, so I did see some more hands, not as many as that have gotten it, but I have seen some that did take a loss, right? So I would tell you that the one that we get calls on the most at EPCOR is wire transfers. That's where we've seen a lot of our institutions taking losses, right? So you've got an employee that gets an email and says, hey, you've got to get this wired out to this person. And if it's someone that doesn't normally do wires for you, right, they're not going to notice that the account number and routing number doesn't look right? They're just going to make sure that the wire gets over to your financial institution and they send it out. And I know that a lot of financial institutions now really look at those wire requests, especially if they're coming in via email, right? It's not somebody calling you on the phone or face-to-face sending that wire out. You know, they will do callbacks, or they've got you using tokens, things like that, right, to enter wires if they allow you to enter wires yourself online through your online banking. But again, that's where we have seen the most losses, is they target an employee that's not really one that maybe pays your invoices, or it may be somebody who does pay your invoices, and they're just like, okay, this is coming from the CFO, I gotta get this paid today. They're saying, you know, we don't wanna pay any late charges, I gotta get it done. And then later on they kind of think, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that, right? Well, the deed's already done, and I will tell you, wire transfers, once they go, they go. They're irrevocable. Now, your institution can make an attempt to try to get that money back, right? But 9 times out of 10, usually 10 times out of 10, the fraudsters on the other end, they're waiting for that wire. And as soon as it hits, they take all the money. Right? I mean, they're waiting. They're calling their bank every 5 minutes. Is it in? Is it in? Is it in? Right? Because I want to take the money. All right. So now let's move on to online banking. So let me ask this. How many of you in the room use online banking for a lot of, yeah, I do too, right? It's easy. And as Mark and I were talking before I came up here today, you know, we're kind of used to that now, right? Most of you don't even go into a branch and talk to anyone, right? It's faceless banking. You're doing everything through online, right? You can look at your statements, you can transfer money, all kinds of things without ever talking to anyone or facing anyone, all right? So this type of fraud happens when a cybercriminal steals your banking details to gain access to your accounts, right? It's pretty simple. That's what they want. They want to get your credentials to your online banking so that they can start moving your money into accounts that they control. And this really, when we're talking online or account takeover, we're talking not only your websites, right? So a lot of you go out onto a website and use online banking, but we're talking about the apps on your phone too, right? A lot of institutions have apps that you can get that same information with. So it kind of goes, you know, across the board. So cyber criminals utilize sophisticated means to lure unsuspecting victims into sharing their banking details. So it's really important that online banking users know about the attacks and really how to guard against them. And there's really 2 types of online banking fraud. And the first one is probably the one you've heard the most about, right? Account takeover. And these attacks often involve social engineering techniques, right? Where they will put malware on your system, or they will just call you outright and pretend that they're someone from the financial institution to get your login information, right? And so usually phishing is used in this type of scam, right, where the phisher impersonates the victim's legitimate banking institution, right? And they'll either send an email out to confirm your login information, you know, just so everyone in the room knows. I mean, your financial institution, I don't care where you bank, right? They're never going to ask for login credentials or a PIN number through an email. They're never going to ask you that over the phone, right? So those are things that you need to not only be educated on, but your employees as well. That's just not something they're ever going to ask for. So you've also got vishing, right? There's phishing that comes through email, but vishing is actually the same thing. They're trying to get your credentials, but it's done over the phone rather than through an email, right? And so we saw a lot of this last year, more on the consumer side, where consumers were getting a text message. Text message looked legit, like it was coming from your financial institution, and it said, hey Marcy, you know, we have a Home Depot charge coming through on your debit card for, you know, 1,000 and whatever. We need you to either, you know, call us at this number. You know, don't respond if you did do the transaction. But if you didn't do the transaction, call this 800 number immediately. And a lot of consumers were fooled by that. They called the 800 number, right? And the fraudster on the other end said, okay, you know, if you didn't do this transaction, in order for us to stop the transaction from going through on your account, we can do that. We're going to need to get into your online banking to stop that. Number one, that's not how debit card transactions are stopped, okay? But a lot of consumers can be fooled, right? And so, you know, the fraudsters were pretty smart on these attacks with the consumer, right? They're like, well, we're not going to ask them for their passwords. And so while they had them on the phone, they said, okay, you know, I need to get into your online banking in order to, you know, stop this transaction from happening. So they would ask them what their user ID was. Okay, so I told them Marcy12345. All right, so they put in Marcy12345 as my user ID on the actual website, and then they hit forgot password button. Okay, and then they tell the person on the phone, they say, well, you're going to get a 5-digit, 6-digit code PIN number to your cell phone. They're like, oh, yep, I just got an alert. Well, I need that PIN number. Okay, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now they have access into your online banking because they just had the opportunity to reset your password. Okay, so that was really what we saw a lot of in 2022 was, you know, these people trying to pretend like they were your financial institution, and they were just trying to help you by stopping this transaction. So again, there are alerts that financial institutions do send out, right? There are fraud alerts that you'll get on your phone, but they should never ask you to call a number one, right? And once you call that number, they're asking to get into your online banking. That's never how they stop a transaction. If it's through a debit card, you're usually calling their fraud area and they can stop the transaction right there. They just reject it, right? So just, you know, letting you know that's kind of what we were seeing last year. You also have the standard stealing of passwords, right? So account takeover can, you know, happen with malware, like I said, key loggers, right? We've got people that'll put malware on there. So if you've got employees that will click on the link, right? If they don't feel it's a suspicious email or something like that, they'll go ahead and click on it. And once they have that login information to your online banking, well, you know, it's on at that point, right? They're going to get in there, see how much money you have. They're going to start transferring money out. You know, some even get creative. If you don't really have a lot of money, they will go ahead and pay maybe some of their bills out of your account, right? So their rent, things like that. So, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter if you have a lot of money or a little money. Whatever you have, they want it, okay? And so again, you know, you can use key loggers where they're putting a key logger on there to where it's looking at the keystrokes, right? So if they click on the link, it's put some kind of a key logger on there. That's another way they can get what your credentials are, right? So they're not asking you outright what your credentials are. They're just gonna wait until you log into online banking and they can get it through a key logger. Malware is another big one, right? And again, malware is usually downloaded once you click on that link. So again, if it looks suspicious, if they're getting something from someone they don't know, I mean, don't engage with the email at all right? And so they also have where they just steal the passwords, right? By forcing the victim to give them the password. So we've seen where you have people say, well, we were coerced into giving our password, or we were in fear So we went ahead and gave them, our credentials, things like that. Hacking of your Wi-Fi networks, right, involves internet connections that are unsecure. So it's smart to educate people that really you shouldn't be accessing your online banking at a Starbucks, right, or a grocery store or anywhere where you might be able to get free Wi-Fi. I mean, that's great, it's free, but it's also unsecure. Right? So anytime you're getting into financial data or any kind of sensitive information, you need to be using a secure Wi-Fi connection, right? The other type, right, so, improvements to technology and cybersecurity means that account takeover, I think, has become a little tougher to execute, which brings us to the second type of online fraud, which is automatic transfer systems. So cyber criminals developed a workaround, imagine that, a workaround for account takeover by developing new automated techniques to execute attacks with a lower risk of being detected. So automatic transfer systems really don't require that attacker to rely on the login scam, right? Instead, these automated systems monitor a computer user's activity. And when the user logs into the banking account, well, then it's injecting malware, right, into the legitimate site. So that's the way they're doing it, right, is getting in that way. And that really negates the need for them to harvest that user information. And it gets them through the multi-factor authentication because they're waiting for me to do everything, right? I'm doing the multi-factor authentication for them. And once they get the malware in there, right, the malware requires careful calibration, right? And so it's very tailored to your online banking. So, I mean, they've gotten pretty crafty to where they can make it very specific to an app that your bank offers, right? Or their website, and it's a lot harder to detect these types of transfers because they're coming in kind of through the back door by utilizing your users, right? And so that's really the one that's kind of come up and coming right now are these automatic transfer systems where they're injecting this malware, by watching your user's activity. So again, account takeover is the more popular one that we all know about. But again, you guys are kind of combating that one pretty well. I mean, a lot of you have put things in place to mitigate that. So of course, they had to find another way in, right? So how can these types of fraud be mitigated? Well, always use a unique login credentials, right, across different bank accounts. Enable multi-factor or maybe biometric authentication for that additional layer of security. Never click a link in an email, especially if you don't know where it came from, right? Instead, go directly to the legitimate site, right? That website, and put the address. You're typing the address in your web browser. Ensure your banking apps on devices are genuine so that you're downloading them from a legit banking website, right? When you're putting something on your phone like RDC or online banking, those types of apps, make sure you're downloading them from a good website. Become familiar with the financial institution security and privacy protocols, right? State clearly, most institutions will tell you either through communication on the website or through online banking that we're never ever going to ask for a PIN or a password over the phone or through an email, right? They tell you those things. Use virtual private networks, so VPNs, right? A lot of us use VPNs, I know EPCOR does, to secure your internet connections before you're logging into any kind of banking information. protect your devices from antivirus software, right? And make sure you keep those up to date. So again, if there's patches that are coming out, that you're actually getting those patches out there. All right, the next type of fraud is one that has been around for a bazillion years, right? Again, checks aren't going away, but somehow criminals know that in today's environment, a lot of us really aren't scrutinizing checks. Whether you're the one issuing a check, right? Or you're the one receiving a check for payment. They're stealing these items, they're altering the names or the amounts or both. Some can even counterfeit your items. With the technology with printers today and the ink that they can get and the paper stock that you can buy at a home, at an Office Depot or whatever, they can make these checks look just like yours, right? So it's very easy for them to do this, right? So businesses, whether you're receiving checks for payment, right, or you're the one issuing them out, it's important to view your items, right? So if you are receiving checks as payment, how many businesses in the room still receive checks as a payment for something? Okay, so several of you, right? How many of you really look at the check? Okay, so a few of you. Most of you look at, okay, you're paying invoice this. Yep, that's the right amount. All right, that one's good. Boom, right? How many of you really look at the payee names? Look at the amounts with really great detail, right? Because how can you spot if something's altered? Well, I will tell you, a lot of times criminals use household products. I know that nail polish remover, right? Women's nail polish remover can alter a check, right? You just kind of use a little cotton swab to erase the payee name, right? But you can usually tell when somebody's done that because the paper gets wet, right? By altering either the amount or the payee name. And so you're going to kind of notice, well, it looks like, the payee name got wet somehow. Well, if a check goes through your washing machine, the whole thing's going to get wet and ruined, right? Not just the payee name or the amount name. But you can usually tell if a check got wet and then now it's dry. It just looks different. A lot of times the criminals don't wait long enough, right? They're anxious to commit the crime, and so they wash the check with, household chemicals, and they get impatient and they just start writing in the new payee name in ink, and so the ink looks smeared, right? A lot of times they will just add things to a check, right? So if your customers leave enough space in there, right? So let's say I wrote a check for $900 to pay for something. Well, in the written amount, or in the numbers, right, that it's showing, they left enough space in there for me to just put a 1 and a comma, right? But then in the written line, they wrote the word 1 because they left enough space there. Now, how many people do you know will put in the written amount, if I'm changing that to $1,900, that I'm just going to add a 1? So now the written amount says $1,900. Most of you are going to write $1,900 or $1,900, right? So a lot of times just looking at the amounts to see if they match, right? Because they're just in a hurry to make it look legit, right? That they're paying. All right, so those are some of the ways you can tell if something has been altered. Counterfeit is much harder to detect, but we'll talk about that here in a minute when we talk about positive pay. All right. So again, it's really important that you really start looking at your items that somebody is paying you with, just to make sure not only that they're got the right amount that they're paying, but that the payee name says it is to you, and that it doesn't look like they've altered it in any way or traced over the name, right, or tried to add something. A lot of times they use different ink. They're not very smart people, right? So if the whole check's written in black ink and I added a 1 and a comma with blue ink and added the word 1 to the written line, I mean, that's a clear indication, right? Somebody might have altered it, right? So, I mean, just really starting to scrutinize those checks a little bit more. But it's also important on the checks that you're issuing, right? I will tell you, on checks that you issue for payroll or to pay an invoice, those are being stolen at astronomical rates. They'll steal them right out of your mail. I mean, these people have gotten so bold that they steal them out of the blue mailboxes. So if you think you're putting it in a secured place, not so much, right? So they are stealing your information. A lot of times it could be internally. So maybe you pay your employees with a check and you have to let that employee go for whatever reason, and they're ticked off at you now, right? Well, they have one of their old checks, one of your old checks. They know what your routing and account number is. They can just go make up some checks, right, and counterfeit them. We've had that happen. Past employees that, are bitter about being let go or whatever the case was, right? So checks that you are issuing, it's really important that you're looking at the ones coming in, clearing every day, right? So, I mean, one of the ways to mitigate checking those is positive pay. And I know this is one of the things that Cass Commercial is going to talk about that they offer, right? And there's variations of positive pay. You've got, regular positive pay, which is, they're automatically going to match each check presented against a list of checks that you issue, right? But, that sounds like a great idea, but in theory, you as the business must be diligent. You have to look at positive pay every single day, and you have to look at it as soon as you get those reports, right? And don't just look that, okay, yep, this check came in for that amount, yep, that one's good, right? You really need to start looking at the actual item. Click on it and look at it. See if the payee name changed. Because if somebody stole it, it doesn't matter if the check number was good and for the same amount. Did the right person get paid? Or did the right person get their payroll, right? So you got to kind of take it a step further. So, banks are trying to help you, but you've got to be diligent in really viewing those items every day. So that's what payee positive pay is, right? So you could have payee positive pay that doesn't just look at the numbers and the amounts, but it's going to look at the payees as well for you. You've also got ACH positive pay now, right? Where the account holder, you can provide to your bank a way for companies to allow debits, okay? We're only going to allow debits from these companies. Everything else, return, right? We don't do business with them. And it's important to have your vendors that you are paying or your employees that, are supposed to be getting paid, right? Employees will be the first one to tell you if they don't get paid, right? But it's important for your vendors and suppliers to also understand, if you say, hey, yeah, I mailed you out a check 2 weeks ago and they still haven't gotten it, they need to let you know that, right? Because then your financial institution can do some digging. Because if you're showing on your books that, yeah, that check came through a week ago, it paid, right? So, yeah, we paid you. And they're saying they didn't get the money. They can do some investigation work to see where it was deposited, right? Who actually got the money. So if somebody stole it and altered it, or sometimes it goes through a lockbox and it just gets posted to the wrong place, right? But either way, you need to know as soon as possible. The last thing I'm going to talk about, we just talked about one of the oldest forms of fraud. Let's talk about the newest form of fraud, right? And this type of fraud utilizes artificial intelligence, where fraudsters are able to mimic individuals. So while AI has many well-meaning uses, it can also be used as a tool to commit fraud. And as incidents of fraud are on the rise, AI is one of the developments that's to blame for a lot of it. And that's due to the AI's ability to mimic and imitate an individual, right? Which fraudsters have used to their advantage. So AI is able to absorb all your personal data, right? So it's able to absorb all the communications and emails and photos, video recordings, voice recordings, right, to impersonate a real human being. And so, the types of fraud that they're committing is they're doing unauthorized transactions, they're doing phishing scams, identity theft is the big one that they're using this type of technology for, right? So synthetic identity fraud, where the fraudster will use AI to generate a synthetic identity, right, which is a combination of real information, but also bogus information, right? So they can generate a realistic personal details about a person, right, making it really hard for you to detect it, right? Because our traditional fraud detection systems really haven't, been boosted up to look for some of these things, right? And so, for example, let's say an attacker's harvests large quantities of data, right? Personal information about you, starting with identification numbers, like social security numbers, right? To create a whole new identity. And these blended synthetic identities will usually use, let's say, a valid social security number, but then they use a bogus name with it, or an address, or date of birth, okay? And so AI algorithms can create these synthetic identities, that are highly convincing. I know I even got a call from some of our institutions where they were told that people were getting a phone call from their loan officer, and it sounded like their loan officer, and they knew all the questions to ask. And this loan officer was asking for confidential information about their loans and things that they had with their financial institution. But the person on the other end, the business they were talking to, said it sounded just like Marcy. I've been dealing with Marcy for years, right? And I know what she sounds like on the phone. It sounds just like her. So AI is able to mimic, right, what I look like. They can mimic how I sound. So yeah, it's getting a little scary out there. So also AI can create what we call deep fakes. That's what they call them, right? It's a fake video or an auto recording that appears real, right? Fraudsters can use these deep fakes to impersonate executives or even key personnel. As you can see, this type of deep fake that was created had took this guy's picture here and said he was Tom Cruise, right? So it created a deep fake that looked like Tom Cruise, looked just like him, all right? And it bypasses many of the legal requirements, right? So once they have the synthetic identity, right, they can open accounts as you, they can apply for credit, loans, all kinds of things. They can make fraudulent purchases. So again, it's getting a little more high tech in today's environment. So deepfakes leverage the AI techniques to manipulate or fabricate visual and audio content. So again, like I said, we were getting calls from financial institutions that loan officers were making these calls to get information. However, it sounded just like them. They really thought it was their loan officer that they have dealt with for years. AI can be used to automate hacking attempts, right? So AI is also used to carry out attacks where the system tries every possible combination of a password to get your password. So, it's not just somebody in their basement anymore trying to come up with variations, right? It's actually AI that is taking all the information it knows, your birthday, your kids' names, your kids' birth dates, and it's running that all through AI automatically for them to come up with whatever your passwords might be. AI can also be used to identify vulnerabilities in a system, especially in a banking system. So they're looking to see if maybe you haven't applied patches, right? So they're looking for holes that they can get in through. And now it's, again, not somebody in their basement sitting there for hours on end trying to figure out how to get in. They use AI to help them with finding the holes in your system, right, and your weaknesses. But on the flip side of committing fraud with AI, it is widely used by the financial institutions in the financial sector to detect fraud. So not only are the fraudsters using it, but your institutions are using it as well to detect fraud, right? So for example, a financial institution may use AI to analyze their credit applications or opening accounts online, right? That became very popular when COVID hit. Or detecting some types of red flags, right, of unusual activity. However, the current AI that a lot of this fraud detection is using is very limited, right? So its accuracy isn't always right on spot, right? So if something kicks out on a report as suspicious to a financial institution, it usually takes some human intervention, right? So a human being is going to look at the report and say, oh, no, I think that was valid. Marcy really did do that transaction. So you're getting false positives. And the reason why is because AI has become so advanced, right, that some of these fraud detection systems that either your business or your financial institution have just are very limited, because now we're talking about your fraud detection needs to take a vast amount of information and try to detect an anomaly, right? Not just a little bit of information, but a wide variety of information. And, a lot of financial institutions, if you're a large financial institution, you can invest in those kind of things, right? So they've budgeted to invest for those things, but I will tell you, a small community bank, it's harder for them to budget for that. This is costly detection software that they would have to purchase, right, in order to find and detect AI types of fraud that are happening. But it is something that smaller institutions need to start looking at. Like I said, a lot of the larger institutions, they know it's a problem, and so they've invested in that. So as technology evolves, so do the methods of detecting it. So, the promising developments in AI that could significantly enhance fraud detection and prevention from a financial sector's point of view would be, they're looking at real-time detection, right? So you're not getting a report after the fact. You're getting a real-time alert that, hey, this does not look right. So you're trying to stop it before it actually happens, right? So it's going to be able to identify anomalies, right? So AI can help banks and their bank fraud detection systems take immediate action and not, a couple hours down the road or even waiting for a report to come out the next day. It's also developing more sophisticated algorithms, right, to detect the more complex patterns of behavior. It also is looking at creating personalized fraud detection systems, right? So using a user's specific behaviors. So it's looking at Marcy's behavior specifically versus putting in these, what do you call them? Like behavioral analytics that are kind of across the board, right? So you're looking at this, 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 and this for every account holder. It's going to make it more narrow, okay? We're looking at this, 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 and this for Marcy because this is her normal activity. She gets paid twice a month, right? She's had the same address for the last 10 years, right? So it will detect any of those weird anomalies that are specific to me. And as we look at the future within the financial services industry, it's clear that AI is really going to kind of play a pivotal role, right, in the landscape of fraud detection. So as AI becomes more prevalent, it's also likely to become a frequent use for fraudulent activity. Therefore, financial institutions and businesses really should invest in advanced analytics and an AI-based fraud detection or prevention system, because that's really where we're seeing the fraud moving to, is more of the AI types of fraud. A lot of times it is somebody in their basement, right? Some person in their basement, a single person. A lot of times though, especially with the AI ones, it's more of a group, right? You've got a group of people that have come together and collectively said, you know, I know how to make money and here's how we're gonna do it. So there's a lot of rings that are going around. A big one, especially on the counterfeit checks, I will tell you that there was a whole ring out in California that counterfeited checks during COVID. So this type of fraud happened between 2020 and 2021. It happened through those 2 years. They were not caught until the beginning of 2022, and they were actually indicted. And do you want to know whose checks that they were counterfeiting? Treasury checks. So yeah, these guys are smart, and they figured out how to counterfeit a treasury check. And they finally caught this ring, and it was a group of like 5 or 6 guys out of California that were passing these treasury checks. And so now even Treasury has, become very diligent in making sure financial institutions are knowing what to look for, right? There are security features within a Treasury check, but there's more than one. And a lot of institutions, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, it has a watermark, we're good. Or they went out to the website, right, where you can validate, oh yeah, check 100 whatever was issued and it hasn't paid yet, so we're good to go. But these fraudsters got smart, right? They know that when you went out to verify those on the Treasury's website, that it was just looking at a check number. So they gave you the right check number, the right amount. It wasn't looking at the payee, right? And they had changed the payee to their names on all of these items. Yeah, so yeah, good question. It can be one individual, but usually when you're losing lots of money, it's gonna be more than one that are working together. Any other questions? Yes?
Most of us in here probably had a credit card accounts at company-wide or individuals within our company. Can you talk a little bit about that and or the prevention these company can take to make sure our cards are compromised?
Yeah, so card hacks, right, a lot of times happen at, and it's weird how it can happen, right? I know the Target attack that happened years ago, right? There was an attack, and do you know who committed that? It was the heating and cooling guys that were in there fixing the heating and cooling. And they were able to, get onto the machines and put skimmers, and they were able to get card information. And so that was a huge breach that Target had. And it actually happened with a third party they had in there doing work for them, for their heating and cooling. A lot of these businesses just need to be more diligent, right? If you have card information that you are keeping in-house, right? Don't leave it laying around. Don't leave it unsecure, right? Because anybody, a cleaning person, anybody who can get access to that information, right? Especially if you've got authorizations laying around with somebody's card information, right? If somebody's in there cleaning or somebody's in there doing heating and cooling work, a lot of times they'll wait till hardly anybody's around, or maybe you trust them, right? Cleaning people usually come in after hours, right? So again, if you're keeping that kind of information on a machine that you have, that you're taking payments through, make sure that machine is secure, right? Especially if you've got anybody that has access to your business after hours, or if you've got authorizations laying around, right? So gym memberships, that's a good example of that, right? I write all this information down and they just put it in a filing cabinet in the back. Well, anybody can get to that, right? So now anybody who works at Gym Fitness or whatever can go in there and get all these account numbers and routing numbers and wreak all kinds of havoc, right? Go online and make purchases. So again, it's important for businesses to keep that information secure, especially if you're keeping, any kind of card information within your own shop. Okay. Any other questions before Cass Commercial comes up?
Also, if you have anything, Marcy's going to stick around afterwards, so if you want to ask her individual questions, feel free.
Yep.
Thank you, Marcy.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm going to step in here and just add something to what Marcy's already communicated to you. It's 2 simple words, and if you don't have a policy around this, go home and write one today. It's called out-of-band authentication. If you don't have a policy written right now about authenticating any type of money movement, no matter how you get it, whether it's a phone call, an email, or other way, you must go home today and write a policy. You've got to verify that if somebody's asking you to move money outside of the method that they made the request. So if it comes via email, go to your system, find a phone number that represents a known and accurate phone number for that company, and call that individual and confirm that they do want that money moved. I can pretty much guarantee you that at least half of you in this room have been subject to that kind of a compromise, and your people failed to authenticate the transfer or the change of information out of band. Don't use the phone number that's on the email. I've seen that done too, where that number is a bogus number and it got called and sure it got authenticated, but it wasn't back to the company. So please be sure, if you don't have a policy today, get one in place immediately. And a little extra hint here, the bank has implemented this policy and you're going to get at least 1, maybe 2, and maybe even 3 phone calls back to you when you're asking us to move money on your behalf.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. We're happy that you all are taking this as serious as we are, taking the additional steps to make your network secure and safe as much as possible. So I'm going to talk about ACH positive pay and check positive pay, and then she's got another system she'll talk about. But many of you probably have been contacted recently, and a lot of emails that we are highly encouraging you to get on check positive pay as well as ACH. I'll start with ACH first. The way ACH works is it's all driven by a unique company ID. Every ACH vendor has that. So as those transactions come in with that company ID, we then are reaching out to you once you sign up and say, is this a valid transaction? If it is, and you're going to have future transactions, do you want it? You'll hear us call a safe list, which is the acceptable payee company ID list. Safe list is much smaller. We're going to ask you if you want it added to the safe list for future transactions, so that we know when the next one comes through. We don't have to ask you; it's a known vendor to you, and you've told us it's okay. If a vendor comes through that's not on that list, you may not have told us. Maybe you're working on another. Thank you. Working on a new process. It's okay that you didn't tell us, because once you're signed up with ACH Positive Pay, it's going to come out on a report, on a suspect, if you will. We're then going to reach out to you, and we're going to build that list over time so that we have all of your vendors on there that we know is allowed to take the funds from your accounts. There's not a system you have to use. It's all handled internally. We just have to respond to you. And again, as everyone's mentioned, you may get one or more calls from us because we don't want to just rely on email. Per our bank president, just assume an email is fraud. Every time you get one, just assume it's fraud, take the necessary steps to make sure that it's accurate information and what you need to do. All right. Check positive pay, a little different. There is a system. You can access it through castbank.com through the login access dropdown. You'll have unique credentials. It is not interfaced with business e-banking. It's a separate system by itself. You then have two ways. You can use a file upload to get the information every time you have a check run, or there's an individual. Some of you may not have tried to make all of your transactions ACH and electronic, which is great. If you have a few, just a handful, there's also an individual option that you don't have to worry about creating a file. CSV seems to be the most friendly for everyone, but if you can't do that or you don't want to, there is an option. We train you, we show you the system, we walk you through each step. But again, I know Marcy talked about positive pay, which we, in our minds, we call it MICR positive pay, just checking the MICR line, the check number, and the amount. CAS has decided we don't use that. We always use the payee name verification. So if you're on check positive pay, your payee names are going to be checked. We don't offer the other one any longer. We feel that it's obviously safer and more secure to check everything on that check. And Marcy said it, look at your account daily. Don't just think $100 check for check number 123 came, we're good. Click on that image. Look at that payee, because that's what they're doing. Now they're realizing, they're figuring out we're changing your amount or that check number. Now we're just going to add something, and that's what they're doing. They'll tell you, if it's ABC company, they're just going to add an attention. Vanessa McInnes at the top. I have a fake license, probably, if it's a fraudster. And unfortunately, tellers should not be cashing those checks, but they are getting deposited sometimes. So it's very important that you pay very close attention to those payee names on all of your checks cleared. When you guys leave today, we're going to have some handouts for you. We have our positive pay, kind of what I just talked about, a slip for you. And then we also have some internet security best practices, a lot of things Marcy touched on, and we just feel it's nice to have when you go. A lot of you probably are going to go home and probably think, or back to the office, think a lot about everything we've said, and I know that some of you may not have these things in place, but we highly encourage it. It's for the safety of all of the funds, all of your employees, and all of us. So if you have any questions, just let us know. I think most of you know how to get a hold of Cassie and I, but if not, call customer service. That's the team that you all met this morning when you all came in this morning. But we're happy to help, and again, we're going to call you more often. Please bear with us, but we're doing it for the safety of all of you and verifying who you guys are before we act on any kind of money movement. Okay?
One thing I wanted to touch on before I get into the other product that we offer is Marcy mentioned PIN numbers, and the bank will never call you for a PIN number. Well, we're actually going to start implementing a PIN number database with all of our clients. Many of you have them already for when you do wire transfers with us. The wire department will call you to verify and ask for your PIN. But because of AI, because of the business email compromise, fraud things that we've gotten, we've just determined that a PIN number database is going to be the best way that we can actually know that it's you that we're talking to when you call into us. Again, it's not going to be something most of the time that we're calling you saying, hey, what's your PIN number? It's when you call us and say, hey, Cassie, I need to do this transfer. I'm going to say, hi, Beth, great to talk to you. Could I please get your PIN number and verify a couple other pieces of information with you? And then I will be more than happy to complete that transfer for you. So just be on the lookout for that. It's kind of a new process, but again, some of you already have PIN numbers with us, so you'll just use that whenever you call in. But if you don't, we will be reaching out to you over the next few months. The product that I wanted to talk about is newer to the bank and somewhat newer to the industry. It's called Integrated Payables. Our product we named CAS One Source. So it's one source for payments. The great thing about this is it streamlines your AP process. So your accounts payable department who's dealing with all of these vendors and ACH information, because they want to, this one wants to send an ACH, this one wants to send a wire, this one you only send a check to. That can get overwhelming. And then it comes into play where someone can call your AP department and say, hey, I'm vendor ABC company, I need to change my information, and you change it, and then they never get the money because it's gone to a fraudster. With this product, it's an online system. We talk to your ERP or your payments platform, and you put in the information of who you want to pay and the dollar amount, and then you send that file to CAS, and we take care of making that payment for you. So there's 3 different types. There's V-card, which is a virtual card. So many of your vendors, you might not even realize it, but we have a list that can say, this vendor accepts credit card. So then you would send out a letter, or we send it on your behalf, saying, we know that you accept credit card. Would you mind if we started paying you with this virtual card, because the payment's safer, it's faster, and then you're not going to be open to as much fraud, and neither are we. Many vendors are okay with that. So that's the first piece that we try to push your vendors to. The second one is ACH still. However, the vendor enrolls in what we call a vendor portal. So they will receive an email saying, this company wants to send you these funds. Can you please sign in or sign up? And then they're entering their ACH information to a secure portal, and you never see that information. So you don't know what their ACH banking information is, and then you don't have to be liable for keeping it safe. We, just have that. And then if your company does get a call saying, hi, we're this vendor and we need to change our banking information, your simple response is, great, I see that you're enrolled in the vendor portal. Please log in and change your information there. Because then that way, the fraudster doesn't have their vendor portal login information. If they try to push you saying, we don't know what that is, we don't have it, then you can simply say, well, we're going to have to work to send you another form of payment because we don't accept ACH information. And then the third venue is we will send them a check if they don't accept any of that other things. But the check is then securely mailed from CAS to the company, and hopefully in that process it's safer than the mail going wherever the mail goes. So those are just a few brief highlights of it. I have a product slick back there if you would like to pick it up. If any of you are interested, please feel free to give me a call. Usually with this system, it works better if you have a larger number of vendors, but let's talk. We have other products as well that we might be able to work with you on if you're a smaller company or, want to keep it a little more in-house. I think that was it.